Hello, friends. It's Yves Richard Blanc from Blanc Global Dynamism. I'm excited for another episode of SafeCom. We had some great conversations last week. I hope that you go and you check us out on YouTube for SafeCom episode 2. I had a terrific young executive from Turing that joined us last week. I have another unbelievable, just brilliant young fellow also from Turing joining us this week as well. His name is Duncan Carey. He has a great background in technology. And of course, I'll let him talk a little bit about who he is and what he's doing. We want to, first and foremost, want to thank you for joining us. And again, for following us on our various feeds. But first and foremost, I want you guys to really follow us here on YouTube. Again, ping the bell. Okay, like our content, at the end, once you see it, if you like it, just keep liking us and really help us support you. We can get the information to as many people as we can. So we're excited to be aboard. I want to introduce my good friend, Duncan Carey with Turing. Hello, Duncan.
Hello, Yves. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you for having me on today.
Oh, no, absolutely, man. We're looking for really individuals that know what's going on out there. And really, we want to share great ideas with our viewers, our followers. And we want to make sure that they're going to be able to make the right decisions in terms of the solutions that they need for their companies. So I thought you would be the perfect individual to be able to do that with me this afternoon. So just to start, tell us a little bit about yourself, Duncan, your background, what you've done,
Sure.
and how you ended up being one of the key executives at Turing.
Yeah, I'd definitely love to tell you a little bit about my background. So as you mentioned, my name's Duncan Carey. I'm based out of Brooklyn, New York, but I've lived both in New York as well as in the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as spent some time in Canada. But my whole career has been focused around technology. I initially worked for a company that did risk mitigation for banks and used artificial intelligence and machine learning to identify individuals who might show risk from an account onboarding and identity fraud perspective. So really that's the background that I come from, and it really lined up perfectly with Turing, as well as we kind of look at risk mitigation inside of a larger COVID prevention strategy, because that's really what it backs up to, is this idea of risk mitigation. So I've been working with both the United States and Canada, as well as the EU for Turing now for about a year, and really seen some very interesting developments in the way that we talk about COVID compliance, COVID prevention, and really the solutions behind it, how to really kind of present a myriad of ways to keep your employees safe, but also protect yourself as a business from any kind of liability.
That's terrific, Duncan. So what has been driving businesses to put COVID-19 protection solutions in place now?
Now, I think it really is kind of a mix, and it depends largely on the industry, where the state in which the business is located, and really kind of, when I mention the state, the regulations that might be applied at that given point in time. But if we looked at things, what's really driving business now, I think that it's the two primary categories. One are these essential businesses that are still using some kind of manual process, even pen and paper process when it comes to screening individuals on a daily basis, asking health attestation questions, performing things like occupancy management, having that kind of manual process in place where there is such a, what's the right word I'm looking for, crucial need for that level of protection. Where it's beyond, it used to be a requirement, but now it's become such more of a requirement because of the associated liability. Those are where we still see a lot of success and a lot of great conversations happening about where automated solutions can really add value. I think the other place where we're seeing a large interest in, having robust COVID protection strategies is people frankly want to get back into the office. I don't know about you, but I haven't been in the office for I guess over a year now. Yeah, I guess a year and a half roughly.
With me.
And a lot of businesses who are looking to either open up new offices or really just make use of the space that they already have, and also just kind of help foster that company culture that really is hard to grow or maintain when you're not meeting with people, if not on a daily basis, then at least on a regular basis. So I would say, automating that COVID screening plot process, as well as really helping people with their office reopening strategies, has been real big driver for having great conversations around protection and the ways that automated solutions might be able to help.
Now, have you seen a growth in the direction of these major enterprises looking to reopen their brick and mortar commercial offices again? Have you seen that at the end of the first quarter?
Yeah, I think we're starting to think it's started happening. I mean, we had some initial conversations with some companies, actually, even in Q3 of last year, when a lot of people felt that the virus was going into some sort of recession, and that we might be kind of at the light at the end of the tunnel. I caution everyone when I had those conversations that there's still a need to have measures in place, that even though we are kind of seeing a little bit of a dip, it's always can spike back up again. And I think that's still the case even now as we see an increase in variants. But definitely we are seeing, especially here in the US, a significant drive towards office reopening. And really kind of not only providing the protections, but also providing, your visitors and your employees with the peace of mind that every step that it can be taken as being taken to provide them with a safe and clean work environment.
Okay. So let's say you've had this conversation with a company looking to reopen. Do you see them going back to the levels they used to be pre-COVID? Or are they staggering people back into the office?
I think almost across the board, especially, I do most of my business in the Northeast, and it's been staggered opening. I think, it always starts off with a couple individual, maybe they'll do groups staggered on certain days, things along those lines, because doing a full reopening is still a little bit far off. And there's still a lot of regulations, especially in states like the Northeast, about, this is a certain occupancy requirement that you can have as individuals look to go back in. Similarly, we're starting to see some kind of measures around vaccination, and being able to track that inside of an environment is also going to be very important, while also keeping people's personal privacy in mind. That's another concern as well, without going too far into that we also have to take into account. So as we do bring people back in, it's the kind of I think every company has a different strategy based off of the number of locations they might have. Are there certain critical aspects of their business that have continued to remain open? Are there teams that really could significantly benefit from being back in the office, where having that kind of interfacing role is incredibly important, specifically in places like operations? And then, kind of building on that as well, making sure that, if we are bringing people back in, that it is adhering to all those state and local regulations. So if you have different offices in different states, making sure you have an approach for reopening that meets the guidelines being set by either, that state or that municipality. So really, I think interestingly enough, one of the things that I've heard come up in a lot of the conversations that I've had is being able to have a strategy or reopening plan that is as agile as the change in regulations. I think that's something that is not talked about enough, where, a plan that you come up with in 1 month might not be the one that will meet the regulations, depending on what the transmission level is, depending on we always are seeing changes in guidance. I know even today the CDC released new guidance about how wearing masks outside, for example. We're always finding out more as we study the virus more. So being able to have an approach that is flexible, while at the same time rigid in the way that it adheres to the standards and whatever those might be from either the federal government, state, or local municipality.
That is a tremendous point. So what is the advantage? And we talk about how wonderful touring is and the flexibility it provides, the innovation on an ongoing basis, and how much investment is going in to really innovate on a monthly basis. What separates them from these other companies out there? Because you're mentioning this flexibility. What makes them great and really separates them from the group of other companies who manufacture these type of devices?
Well, I think, kind of starts a little bit at our origin, where we are really very much a technology company at heart. I think that versus a lot of the other solutions out there, they're kind of taking the approach of, say, a marketing kiosk, or they're really kind of not making sure that these devices have a long life cycle. And having a long life cycle is not just related to the hardware, but it's also related to the larger platform itself. So as a tech company, I've always worked with platforms where, as much as we can allow the customer to control their own environment, because realistically, they know the best about their own environment, whether they were dealing with banking solutions or COVID-19 solutions. Really being able to give you the control to make not really even make a solution, but have this solution adhere to whatever your environment's needs are. So when we talk about Turing inside of that lens, having a cloud-based platform. So the fact that with the Turing cloud is the back end that allows you to manage those devices inside of your environment, and really gives you the control to, let's say maybe you have corporate guidance around what kind of information you can retain about your employees or visitors. We give our customers the ability to make those changes on their own without having to really interface with someone else. We also make it incredibly easy to do that. It's a matter of, once we get them trained up, which we work with our team to make sure that they understand how to properly use the cloud function, then it's really just a set it and forget it. And then they can go and let's say, the CDC changes the guidance around travel, which actually they recently did a couple months ago, back in February, where you can travel after now 10 days after showing a positive test, as versus the 14 days as before. They can go in there and they can modify their questionnaires on their own, especially when it comes to a mobile experience. And also we do provide some aspects of a managed service, wherein when those larger changes do happen, we will also push them out to the devices themselves, and really kind of add those new features as they become available without really disrupting the flow of the existing environment.
So it's like almost like an automatic upgrade within the system of what it needs to do. And so it's basically turn it on and forget it kind of stuff.
Yeah, but it also, I think it's not just the automatic upgrade aspect. It's the ability that we really understand that every corporation is going to have a slightly different, outlook at COVID, right? There's not a one size fits all model for, COVID prevention solutions. I mean, there's some key fundamentals that will exist in certain states, but that's really dependent on whether or not you have office locations at those states. So what we allow them to do is locally manage, but also back up all the information into a single pane of glass. Because realistically, looking at COVID prevention is not something that should be done on an individual site-by-site basis. While that's necessary, and I think that's important, there really needs to be an outlook as an organization as a whole, rather than just looking at it at, say, the individual level or the entry scanner level or the site level, but really looking at it, being able to stratify that outlook and then drill in the event that an outbreak might have occurred. Because you might see trends occurring in certain areas that might give you an indication of, wait, maybe we should pump the brakes on how many people we're bringing back into the office at this point in time. Just as one example. So
it makes really a lot of sense to have these conversations with your environmental safety directors, folks who really know what's going to be happening as folks come through the door, and really the volume and putting it. These are plans of actions that may take several months to put together. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think they are, but the way that things are kind of moving right now is that it is very fluid in terms of putting a plan together. I would almost actually disagree with that. I think that we can put things together very quickly, although that needs to always be reviewed and guidance needs to be taken. But guidance is constantly changing. Having a multiple months long plan in some cases might hinder you because regulations are moving at a rate. Yeah. So the way the regulation, but it's having a larger plan, but then also being able to look forward, because at the end of the day, we do want to get things back to normal, but we want to make sure that we get people back to normal, back in the office, but we do it in a safe and secure manner, as well as, making sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's when it comes to those regulations that I mentioned earlier.
Right. So then this solution is really great for a large enterprise that has really multiple risks throughout the U.S. Because of the different regulations at the state level. There may be, one or two different things at the federal level, but when it comes to these differences, you're finding them because of entities that are at various locations, either in one state or in multiple states.
I would say that's the case. I think that it really is a solution that is perfectly fit at scale. So for large enterprises, it works really great because you do need to have that holistic organization-wide outlook when it does come to COVID screening. But then you also need to realize that there is that need to cater to certain specific environments, because there will be, as you mentioned, the environmental health and safety manager knows the most about the site that they are responsible for. But at the same time, they might not be privy to conversations at a larger organizational level about how are we preventing ourselves from risk, or how are we going through risk mitigation. So we really do give our company or our customers the tools to create that kind of stratified access, where someone on the local site will be able to manage the devices related to their site, while all the information is still backing up to a single repository that maybe one key stakeholder inside of the larger enterprise organization from that HR department is realistically managing as a whole.
Okay, got you. So I'm gonna throw a question at you, and I know you're gonna probably do a great job with this. I'm gonna give you a scenario. I like to make things difficult for you.
I know. I like it. I like being in the hot seat.
There you go. Listen, I'm gonna give you a scenario of two different, almost opposite type of enterprises, and I'd like to hear on how they differ and what would be the difficulties to creating a solutions, and what kind of the issues and difficulties quite possibly that you've run across in supporting enterprises in these fields.
Sure.
And one is really healthcare, right? Maybe a
Yeah.
healthcare system, a hospital system, and the other one will be banking and finance. Both of them require high levels of really service and also security and data management. Have you worked in both those industries, and what are some of the issues and concerns that you've seen come across, and how have you been able to handle those solutions to really help those two major industries in this country?
So I think there's actually an overlap between healthcare and banking, where there's a common issue and a common thread, and that's how do you store and retain the data? I think in both cases, you're dealing with even, while we're not interacting on a finance level with the, something like the PCI, so the personal credit information of individuals, or things like social security numbers, there's still very stringent protocols about what kind of, how that a financial institution will deal with data. By the same token, it's the same with the healthcare system. So when when healthcare systems and financial institutions are looking at solutions, they need to make sure that there are certain information security protocols that are in place, and that certain standards are being met for the storage, retention, and transmission of data. So in both cases, I think Turing is the only solution on the marketplace that will be able to meet things in these standard information gathering forms, so SIGs, of those types of organizations. So having things like HIPAA compliant certifications, being able to say you're SOC 2 compliant, making sure that the data is, really meeting those generally accepted practices for dealing with, because at the end of the day, these scanners will be pulling in information that in certain states will be considered personal health information. So it needs to be, we need to make sure that that information is well protected. And the way that we do it at a very minute level is we don't store any information locally on the scanner. We see that as, having that level of data on an endpoint is really just exposing you to such a high level of risk. And then after that, we're going to encrypt all the data in storage, transit, and rest. And because we're using a cloud infrastructure like AWS, we can hit those HIPAA storage and data retention requirements. So really having that, what they call I think it's 99% data durability is what Amazon calls it. I think it's actually more than that now, but then we also have to look about it and how we structure it inside of our cloud environment. So in that case as well, that's where we have our SOC 2 certifications. So really looking at change management, not allowing for certain people to get access, doing things like helping work with single sign-on systems. All this is stuff that we can meet on a client-by-client basis. So we have this experience with working with those kinds of environments. I've done a lot of work with financial sector here in the US, and I think we're the only solution on the marketplace that can, for a larger financial institution, can really meet those requirements. I think it's going to be dead in the water otherwise. And if we also look at healthcare systems, I think another thing to note is for healthcare systems, especially ones that are state-run entities, there's going to be an expectation that they're not using any of these banned Chinese camera parts or chip manufacturers.
Right.
Because one of the problems that we've seen is, and unfortunately, my father was in the hospital a couple months ago, and I walked in and they had a big hike vision camera there. If that's a state-run hospital, and that's kind of a no-no in the eyes of the federal government. So we want to make sure that we're using hardware that is compliant with U.S. government regulations, that is not something that's, owned by a majority stake by the Chinese military or Chinese state entities. None of that's going to be a problem with our devices. I mean, I like to hit on that a lot. We do have, obviously, like any kind of manufactured electronic, do have part of our process inside of China, but we're not using the critical parts of the manufacturing process that are a concern to the U.S. federal government, like the chips and the camera parts. None of those are coming from any of these NDAA banned companies. And what NDAA, just for a little more clarification, is the National Defense Authorization Act, which specifies what U.S. federal government contractors can work with in terms of piece of hardware and software.
Got you. Okay. Now, are there any? Where are some of the most difficult type of entities that you've had the pleasure of finding solutions for? Is it in manufacturing? Is it in federal contracting? What areas? What are some of the tough ones you've had to work with?
I think from you're not looking at a category level, but at a larger level, where people kind of think that everything's going to go away tomorrow, or we're just kind of a little bit of a obtuse outlook towards COVID prevention, where doing something that might be more expensive, but maybe is a less of an upfront investment. I've been having those conversations through the last year and a half. I mean, last year and a quarter, where people, told me last summer that, okay, we're not going to make an investment now because we see this going away. I think it's, when we look at what the professionals out there are saying, and, the people who know way more than I do, is that these controls are going to be in place for a little bit longer than most people expect. I think it's something they recently polled, there was a poll done by a UK scientific publication that polled epidemiologists, who told them, they polled them and asked them, how long will these current vaccines be effective? 2/3 said within, there's a 9-month period of effectiveness. 1/3 of them said, so of that 2/3, half said within 6 months, we're going to see the current vaccines that we have in place no longer be effective, which is grim news. And I hope that's not the case. I want to go back to having a social life in New York, but there's also that, the fear of, having these new variants, especially seeing with what's going on in India, having a large portion of the population being infected, and putting these controls in place, let's say, even if they're only for the next 3 months, when it comes to the operational expenditure versus the cost of putting one of these scanners in place, if you actually back out those man hours, we are going to save your company money. And we are going to do it in a way that's easier for you to manage. It's going to make it a much more cleaner outlook of, so all of your data is going to be digitized. It's not going to be sitting either in a paper folder or in a Google document. And these records are going to be easy to access, search, and audit in the event that you do face some sort of civil litigation or audit from, OSHA. But talking about specific industries, if you want me to take a step back to there too, because I would like to hit on that. I think as we've seen regulations change, as we've seen, the guidance change, we have seen the customers who want to implement a solution like ours change as well. So office reopening is becoming a hotter topic. I would have said, a couple months ago, corporate real estate was something that we weren't really having a lot of success with, because frankly, not many people were going into the office, and a lot of these real estate companies were more concerned with how do we, no one's coming in. We got to keep the contracts we already have, try to keep us from losing them, as well as try and still sell space, which wasn't happening during the winter this year because they couldn't even, frankly, they couldn't even get someone for the first meeting. But now I think we are seeing a trend where, people are wanting to get back in the offices, and people are wanting to, corporate real estate does realize that even less from a compliance or partially for a compliance standpoint, but also for a peace of mind standpoint, it's important to show that you as a landlord or, as an administrator of a building are putting your best foot forward in terms of protecting your tenants and their customers and their employees and their visitors. So we are kind of seeing that peace of mind conversation come up more and more, where, we might be dealing with a very low rate of transmission, but there's this, I was listening to an article on the radio, or listening to a story on the radio this morning, is that there's still a lot of a psychological fear of going back to regular, even if you're fully vaccinated, even if, everyone you're interacting with is fully vaccinated, people are still apprehensive. Especially in places like New York City, where we had such a rough time of it, back a year ago. There's still that psychological effect where people, even who are vaccinated, are still nervous to get back in their environments, and where they're taking almost a more cautious outlook than even what the regulations are telling them to do.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. I certainly remember what it was like about a year and a quarter ago. I lost a lot of friends and family members in New York City. As you all know, I'm a Brooklyn guy, just like you, right?
Yeah, same here.
And I love Brooklyn. You know that. So listen, the other thing also that we're looking at certainly we've had great success around the country in terms of vaccinating a lot of individuals. People are
Yeah.
getting smarter about it. A good portion of this population have they're fully vaccinated. Are companies seeing that as a way to kind of like not provide the proper structure with these technologies within their companies? Have you seen a slowdown of through the conversations that you've had, really discussing these solutions with people? And if so, how are we managing that to really open up and finding out really what the issues and concerns truly are?
I mean, I think undoubtedly, you're always going to see pushback. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, when in summer of last year, I was hearing a lot of the same things that I'm even hearing now. But I think that there's some general points that need to be brought up, specifically around, not even just when we talk about the new variants or the long-term efficacy of the vaccines. It's also, I think we've really changed the way that we talk and think about public health in general. I think one of the long-lasting impacts of COVID is that people are much more conscious of when they're sick and how they can affect other people when they are sick. I think this has just been a general cultural change that's occurred. I mean, we've been going through this pandemic situation for over a year now. And it's really, people are thinking about public health in a much different way. And it's being translated and rolled up into an enterprise level. So when I was, I do a lot of business in Canada, and back in July of last year, I sold a bunch of scanners to a company that makes, or is an industrial manufacturer in Canada. And they saw a use case for these devices even for cold and flu season, because something like, I don't know, I think they said something about 30% of the workforce can get knocked off if there's a flu outbreak in one of their locations. So being able to have these kind of controls in place, I think, is really important as we have this shift in public health. I mean, and frankly speaking, this was probably the first winter that I never really got a serious flu or cold. And I think people,
you and I both.
Yeah, I think people are noticing that. And I think that, it used to be where you might be slightly apprehensive to go into the office when you're feeling a little sick. Now that's kind of changed completely. But with that, by that same token, I think people are going to be much more conscious of when they become sick at work, where, especially when we're dealing with things like hourly employees or people who are in an exposed risk category, already in a high risk category, where they're more willing to take action if they think that they got sick at work. Just because we've had this general shift. And I think federal regulators are more willing to slap people on not even slap people on the wrist, but hit them with an audit or fine, because this is, I think, the first time in human history we've really had an airborne virus at this level of transmission reach this kind of critical mass, where it is going to be around to stay. We're going to have to, every year, there are going to have to be new vaccines. There's going to have to be new protocols. Do we ever going to get to a level of shutdown like we had in Brooklyn a year ago? I hope not, but we don't know. I mean, there is a lot of big question marks. I think, the global conversation around these kinds of issues has really changed, where investment is occurring. And this was, if you want to say it or whether or not, the year, I think it was about actually might have been longer than that, about a decade ago, we had, Obama out there talking on the world stage about how we're going to start seeing an increase in these global pandemics. I think it was right after the SARS outbreak in Hong Kong, or was it in Hong Kong? Right. Yeah. And we need to make these kind of controls, and these preparations need to be put in place proactively, because that's the way we have to think about them. And so it doesn't really hurt us to kind of keep these kinds of solutions in place, because the next time an outbreak does occur, you're going to be prepared and you're going to be able to maintain your regular functions much more easily than if you're building things up from ground zero again.
Right. Well, certainly if you have things in place, you want to be prepared. And, companies who are not, they're actually going to be in a place that they can lose a lot of money. So certainly now, as we're touring, they're looking to continue to innovate on a monthly basis and continue to do stuff. So people are going to be vaccinated. People are going to be going back to the offices. We're going to be able to better manage people's health and really collecting that data. What are some of the other functions and or questions that you've come across that companies are concerned post the necessity of high-level COVID functions with these devices? What are some of the other areas that bring value to a company investing in a system like that?
Well, I think we've always been a compliance technology company at heart. Even prior to COVID, we came from a space of making these autonomous patrol robots, these smart cameras, these servers that would sit on top of, the existing security cloud infrastructure, or security camera infrastructure, excuse me. And we have every intention to make these devices part of that offering when we go back and talk to our clients in a post-COVID world, or at least a less COVID-y world, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Because I think COVID is going to be around for a very, very long time. It's just really the companies who will be the most successful will be those that can best manage the concerns and the issues around their employees and clients.
And I think it's going to be on a much more localized level moving forward, where, let's say a certain area has a spike or an uptick, and it's going to kick into effect all of these kinds of regulations that have existed throughout this pandemic in certain areas. Because, we want to be able to mitigate outbreaks. And what that does is, it starts with locally focusing on it when we identify that an outbreak has occurred. And if it's something that's coming from one of your manufacturing plants, and you've caused that outbreak to get bigger, then you're going to have to be able to prove that, it didn't come on site, and that it wasn't your location that was the reason why it spread so quickly. So, that's one aspect of things, but we have every intention of tying these devices into a larger security suite or larger compliance suite, wherein these could be portals for things like facial recognition. These could be used for clocking in for hourly employees. These can be also used for some sort of visitor management function. All that kind of integration is highly possible and already being done with some of our customers. Because we have very much a cloud-based technology platform, some things like downstream integrations are things that we are fully intending to do and have already begun doing them for certain customers, whether that be on an API level or even just providing our customers with the knowledge where they can take one of these Excel documents that we can produce from our cloud platform and then just pop it right into another system. So really just being able to pull that information, and really being a tech company at heart, we don't want to let any aspect of our product suite depreciate if we don't have to, because we want to keep our life cycles going. We want to keep our customers continuing to use our products and continuously add value to them.
Okay, got you. Now, you mentioned that there are opportunities that Turing has been able to work with state government, with federal government. Tell us a little bit about that, and where do we bring the value to, let's say, to the public sector, maybe a small city, maybe a school system, maybe state government, and also the federal government. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you. Just give me an understanding of where that there are great value in some of the work that you're doing with some of these small government entities.
Well, I think, very broadly speaking, these kind of controls that we offer are something that are important to have, because government can't shut down. Things like sewage departments, things like police departments, things like EMS units, these are things that no matter what happens, these things need to in some ways be up and running. They're just with them out, then it's not really things like judicial systems as well. So I've done a lot of work with both the city of Buffalo and with Wayne County. City of Buffalo was through you, but also with Wayne County over in Michigan. And we've set these scanners up initially, working with their federal court, then working with their local court, and then also working with, currently working with other sectors inside of the city itself. So these kind of essential services, they whether or not they face the threat of regulation, which they do also face the threat of liability from if their own employees get sick because they are not protecting them well enough. Right. There is also more just this need to maintain, this need to have something that is very accurate, that something is that being able to give them the ability to respond quickly, the thing that is going to give them trends inside of the temperatures that have been taken. So having that level of intelligence is incredibly important for them. If they do face, a renewed COVID outbreak that is for some reason either vaccine resistant or even people are vaccine hesitant inside of that environment. When we talk about what uniquely, I think beyond just those things that I mentioned, uniquely what Turing can do is also going back to that NDAA point I brought up, where especially with the federal government, it's a requirement. And if there was a school system in Alabama, I think that purchased a couple $100,000 worth of a competitive scanning solution, and the federal regulators really came down on them hard. There was other aspects of the reason why, but one, they barely worked. And then beyond that, they were coming from a provider that, was sourcing them from a camera company that had a controlling stake by the Chinese military, which is something that the federal government was very upset about, that public funds were being used to spend on something along those lines. While it's, the NDA specifically applies to federal contractors and the federal government itself, it still has a kind of downstream effect with local municipalities and people who work with local municipalities. And it's something that they want to see. I mean, I'm not trying to sound corny or anything, but you want to kind of buy American, or not buy, in some sense, someone that is someone who the government is concerned about you working with.
No, absolutely. And certainly I would much prefer, purchase American manufacturing than, a foreign manufacturing. The other thing is also, I would think that most of these municipalities or state governments or county governments would want to deal with an American company that's here that can provide support. Is
Exactly.
that one of the things that, in terms of our strength at Turing, being able to provide that level of support and being here and not dealing with a third party or a foreign manufacturer?
Yeah, I have actually, it's funny you bring that up. I have a coworker who, when she is going up against another competitive solution, will have them, hey, why don't you call their support line and see if anyone picks up? Most of the time, no one does. And if it does, there's someone in China or someone in India. Our support team and our account management team is based here in the United States. And I closely interface with them constantly. No matter the size of the customer, we are always making sure and on top of any issues that might occur. But in reality, we want to be able to reduce the amount of time that you have to call into a support line. So we want to make things very easy to use, and that when we do walk you through the setup process, that there really is a lot of hand holding going on, for lack of a better way of putting it. So we have devoted resources that help make sure that our customers are trained, how they can also train their end employees, and make sure that everything is set up to their liking. And then occasionally, get that feedback. What are things that you'd like to see that might not currently exist? And we're constantly listening to our customers in those regards, saying, hey, if this is here's a gap that they might see, which is rare. And I think more and more we've seen things kind of coalesce around these certain aspects of COVID screening. But especially as we were developing our platform out, it was largely based on the feedback that came from our customers. Where we saw kind of needs being driven, because they know their customers know their environments best, and they probably know the regulations around the states where they're being set up or they have locations the best. So, I learned about one of the features that I put into our devices, which I think is an anecdotal story, but I think it's relevant as we kind of have a larger conversation about privacy, is that I was selling these scanners to a law firm here in New York City. And they, told me that for the state of New York, they consider a temperature number as PHI, but actually not the temperature itself. So actually the temperature itself is the temperature number is PII, but the pass fail is completely fine to save and retain. So what we built out was the ability for our customers to then just import data coming from the scanner. So it hasn't even left, so it hasn't even gone to the cloud, it's not being converted there. But from a scanner basis, they could then blind temperature data and only pull pass fail data. So instead of having a temperature number, it says pass fail. So that helped them meet their own privacy requirements. As well as in Canada, I do business with a number of large enterprises in Canada, and they have many more corporate, they have much more concern around PII in Canada, just from a legal standpoint, as well as, just from corporate policy. So what we've done for them is also give them the ability to turn off the pictures coming from the camera. So we really allow our customers to set these up at an environment basis. And I even have customers who have locations in the United States and Canada, or even in differentiating between different states, and they might change the data that's being imported on that state by state or country or regional level.
Yeah, that provides a great support system. Now, you mentioned that Turing also does business in the EU. Have you seen where there are opportunities where companies will come to Turing and really discuss, hey, listen, we have our executive offices are in Michigan, but we have several locations in Canada, but we handle all our manufacturing, let's say in Europe. Are there opportunities like this that these companies, Turing, it would be able to find solutions in all three of those areas? So North America, both the US, Canada, and also the EU.
Sure. I mean, we have, obviously it's going to be different depending on, EU versus Canada or EU versus United States, there's a bit of or even Canada versus United States, there is a world of difference there. So it's really based off of what the corporate policy is. And there's certain things that we can do in certain countries that we can't do in other countries when it comes to the local regulations. So, in the EU, we can set up these scanners as just standalone devices, which work perfectly. They work incredibly well. They're great at reading temperatures. They're just not going to retain and save all of that data, because not even from a EU compliance standpoint, but also from more of the privacy concerns that happen on an individual level in European countries. There is a lot more concern around that stuff than say in the United States, or even versus the United States versus Canada. So we really can provide comprehensive solutions, and I come from a world of data storage and retention, as I mentioned earlier. So we're very familiar with those local regulations and can make a solution and a recommendation on the basis of whatever needs fit your current or your organization and the geographies associated with it.
Gotcha. Well, it makes perfect sense, Duncan, because again, it's really finding the right solution for the right client in the right moment. I mean, it provides them really pretty much any concerns they may have or questions, and really structuring the solution specifically around either that state mandated regulation, or the federal or even local opportunities to bring in some of their individuals back into the office, or even if individuals are either vaccinated or not. So whatever the issue or the concern, it sounds like you should be able to meet those solutions at the level that you meet those clients.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been in a situation where I've lost business off the fact that we weren't able to meet certain requirements, at least recently. I think that now how fully fleshed out this platform has become is that unless you're looking for something that's going to integrate with everything under the sun, then we're going to be able to meet every single requirement around COVID compliance. The only reason that we might get stalled up, I mean, frankly, I'll be, is, there might be a solution out there that can integrate better with someone's, employee management system. But they're not going to be able to do the things that really matter. We actually talk about preventing an outbreak from occurring, like temperature checks, accurate temperature checks, long-term viability of the device, be able to meet NDAA requirements, be able to move data safely and securely. None of that stuff is actually going to be occurring. So you're really kind of missing the main point of why you'd be buying a solution like this, which is for COVID screening and prevention. It's not, that is going to be the biggest motivator, as well as, what encompasses that is also the ability to save and retain that data, automate that whole process, and be able to produce it and access it in easy, streamlined fashion without running into errors left and right and having to, learn a completely new, difficult to manage system.
Right. So it's almost like really having an easy button, in other words.
Yeah, that's that's really what it is. It's taking what can be a very complex compliance situation and making a compliance as well as protection situation and making it incredibly easy to manage. Although I've worked in tech most of my career, I'll candidly say I'm not the most technical person. But I have no problems managing our dashboard. My customers have always given me very positive feedback on it. And when there is negative feedback, or if there is something that they'd like to see, we do take that information, we take it back to our engineering team, and we look for ways to fix it.
Excellent. Well, Duncan, you have been amazing as usual. I am so grateful you took a few minutes.
Anytime.
Very, very busy schedule, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to working with you more and see the finished product. And thanks for having me on and I'm sure we're going to be talking again very soon. Absolutely.
It was a great time. Thank you again. And I'm sure our audience is very, very grateful for the opportunity and all the quality information that you've shared with them. Thanks again, buddy. And I want to come down to Brooklyn soon.
Yeah. Does this give me This could be a free meal on you. Just give me a free meal on you, buddy. at least a martini. I'll take a martini.
Well, there you go. No problem.
First round on you, Eve. Have a good one.
We'll go to a great steakhouse, and I know there's one not too far from where you live in Brooklyn.
Oh, I know, and I got this jacket, so I'll throw that on too. Weather permitting.
Lugers, baby. Yeah, we'll go to the Lugers.
Okay. You have a good rest of your day. Thanks.
Well, thanks a lot, buddy. Thanks a lot. Again, we just had a terrific episode of quality information. This is why we're here. This is why we're putting the time and the investment into SafeCom, because we want to share all this really terrific quality information to you out there. Thank you so much for the support that you've been giving us. It is a brand new show, but it's amazing the kind of feedback we've been getting. We're so grateful to everybody. So again, I want you guys to remember, you need to ping that bell. Ping the bell. If you like our show, please like it. You need to subscribe and add in some comments, some questions. Let us know what you'd like to hear about, because we are really talking to a lot of experts out there. We're going to have them on the show over the next week, 2 weeks, next month. Tell us what you'd like to hear about, what you'd like to learn. If you have various questions, send us an email or send us, some comments with your questions. We will pursue and get the right expert on the show to really discuss these things, because we are all about, health and safety information and sharing it, not directly from me, because I know a few things, but I don't know everything. But what I want to do is really invest and really produce the show and getting in the greatest minds around this issue, this concern, which is health and safety, and bringing them in and really sharing their years of expertise with you. Again, thank you very much for joining us. Please do not forget, subscribe, like us, and hit us with some comments. Help us get better every single week. This is your host, Yves Richard Blanc, and we look forward to our next episode next week. Look out for us. We're going to be having a terrific guest. We're talking with people in law, in health and medicine, in manufacturing, all sorts of different areas who are going to be sharing their expertise with you.